For as long as I can remember, Resident Evil was one of the franchises that I always returned to no matter what medium it released on. The concept of zombies alongside biological research and surprisingly deep lore kept me interested ever since I tried it on PlayStation 1. Now keep in mind that I was way too young to play that, but my parents didn't really know much about any of it, so I was free to experience the horrors of Raccoon City even before I fully grasped the overarching story was about, and there was always something so eerie in the way Japanese people do horror by focusing on mental decay and atmosphere that is scarier than any cheap jump scare usually presented in other horror genre. Because of it, I'm starting a huge project where I'm going to talk about every single Resident Evil game, which includes remakes and originals, as well as films in both live action and animation. Keep in mind that some of this is recorded prior to Resident Evil 9 releasing, specifically this video, but in due time I will cover Resident Evil 9 as well. I finished it and I loved it, and if Capcom continues like this, I feel like the future of the IP is going to be amazing, but we will get to that eventually. Now without further delay, let's talk about Resident Evil 2 Remake and why I think it's so engaging and why it works, in a world where people are simply tired of remasters and remakes because most of them never really portray what made the original game so fun and engaging in the first place. These videos will be spoiler heavy, so if you haven't played them, I recommend doing that and then coming back to this. The year is 1998. It has been 2 months since the incident in Arklay Mountains, and people of Raccoon City have no idea what is about to come, as Umbrella Corporation safety standards were as good as a safe room without no ink ribbons. Game begins with an unknown truck driver driving towards Raccoon City, listening to a radio show where a guy is saying that he saw a woman coming to him, and once he got a good look at her, he saw that her flesh was rotting, and he even saw one guy getting attacked by, as he describes, these things. Of course, the radio host didn't really believe him, as that was only the beginning of problems, and people really didn't fully grasp how fast things will change for worse. That's where in the outskirts, truck driver goes over a woman which seemingly just appeared out of nowhere, and in his full confusion he did not realize this woman was already a zombie infected by the T-virus, because some of it, a very small portion, did go from Arklay Mountains, but it's not the primary leak of what caused Raccoon City to fall, as T-virus from Umbrella facility within the city was the main culprit, and we can thank William Birkin for that because, well, his strain of T-virus broke out and, well, it also got into the sewers, spread by rats and ending up in water itself. It's also where we meet Leon S. Kennedy for the first time, Capcom's golden boy, coming to the city on his first day as a rookie cop. Now, Leon's backstory before arriving to the city has 2 versions that I was able to find. First one for the remake being what Capcom wrote on their official account, saying that he was ordered to stay at home just before his first day on duty, but with no further contact afterwards, he grew suspicious and decided to head to the police station because arriving in Raccoon City several days later would end up changing the course of his fate. But in the official guidebook for the game, which was released with the original, Leon supposedly broke up with his girlfriend because he was leaving the place where he lived to go to Raccoon City, so that was the reason for the delay. He did volunteer for the assignment as he was interested in a series of strange incidents happening in that town, and his strong sense of justice compelled him to go and see what was all that about. Do keep in mind that this translation is from a book in Japanese translated through my phone, so there might be some errors in fine details, so you're free to correct me. It is interesting that in the new version of the lore, Capcom didn't really mention that argument with his girlfriend, so for the remake's sake we will go off of that, but when I go to the original, we will go with that version itself, so both are properly covered, and I will explain more in detail when I play that. So Leon arrives to Mizoil gas station to tank up, and that's where he sees a car with open doors just standing there with no one else in sight, and the cop in him said, well, I'm going to see what's wrong. The other police officers were already on the scene, but because of the infection wasn't as known, at least at that moment, they couldn't account for the fact that people they wanted to arrest had a different plan. Well, their flesh. So basically Leon stumbled upon an active scene, and even he wasn't fully aware because the first zombie that starts approaching him, he says freeze, not knowing it won't do anything. Because keep in mind the Raccoon City outbreak already happened, or well, the initial stage of it, because Resident Evil 3, at least from the first part, takes place on the September 28th, but Leon arrives on the 29th. Leon and Claire also leave early on the 30th of September, while Jill is still fighting for her life. She will leave the day after on the October 1st, moments before the thermobaric bomb actually drops. So technically Leon and Claire were extremely lucky to get out before that. If they stayed a bit longer, well, let's just say we wouldn't have Resident Evil 4 and Code Veronica. Lore is a bit weird with the originals and remakes and stuff along the way, but we will get through it. At least I refer to it as the remake story here, and then I will compare it when we get to the original in another video. Now Claire Redfield arrives at the same time to search for her brother, Chris Redfield, so she also did not have a clue what was actually happening. And they both soon realize that they will be overwhelmed by zombies, and they have to haul to the car quickly to find help in the actual police station. But little did they know once they arrived that, well, the city has lost the fight, and most cops, RPD and STARS members are, well, gone or even turned into one of these things, except for the ones which are actually hanging around Jill Valentine and the rest with the, Resident Evil 3 story at that time, but their time was also ticking. I also want to say that the T-virus zombies are my favorite ones. No diss to Las Plagas and Mold or other strains, but the idea of slow-moving zombies which can tank a lot of shots was always my favorite way of portraying horror. They're not that tough to fight, but in huge numbers they're pretty much unstoppable, and just one bite is enough to lose the fight. And that is not counting the Crimson Heads in the Resident Evil 1, which you cannot really destroy unless you set them on fire, but that's a whole different story. At least for the regular people. Our main characters though, they brush off every single bite they receive, it's just how things go. Once they arrive in front of the station, they are soon overwhelmed by zombies, and that's where our truck driver friend arrives full speed. He was already bitten, so his days were pretty much numbered and he couldn't, see where he was going. In any case, lots of explosions happen and Leon and Claire get separated, where Leon heads right through the front gate of the police station while Claire is forced to use the back entrance. This is relevant as original Resident Evil 2 had two scenario system, either with Leon A or Claire B, or maybe you're going to go with the Claire A scenario and then Leon B scenario. Basically, you choose with which character you want to play first. But in the remake, you can technically take Claire first and Leon second, but at least I felt like they were not that interlocked like in the original, but rather having specific parts of that story canon, like all of them escaping and everything like that, but there are some inconsistencies we will talk about as Remake is very loose with the lore. But starting with Leon, we get into the empty RPD, where stuff already happened with only a few cops left inside. Primarily this guy, which well ends up like this, so that cop Elliot was already trying to figure out how to escape through a secret exit. That's our first clue, because we get a notebook from him, scribbled with stuff to unlock these 3 medallions we will have to find. As fight begins, Leon is saved by Marvin Branagh, the last remaining cop in the station, but he was already hurt at that point and Leon switched into cop gear and started looking for clues himself. Also, one thing that RE Engine does really well are facial expressions, so the fear and guilt we see from Marvin here as he says to Leon to shoot and not hesitate, tells us that at start, well, if your body gets infected, if you think you can reason with a zombie, you would be very wrong. Resident Evil 2 by its nature retains more of the survival horror elements than action we usually get in later Resident Evil games, especially because Leon doesn't do front flips, we get to see, but we actually get to see that inexperience in how he behaves around certain things. Like especially this part in library, where later in the game we get to remove the crank and move the bookshelves so we can, pass through. But let's face it, older Leon would just jump over it, so that part was kinda funny. And survival elements done here honestly complement the original really well. There aren't hordes of zombies, but the ones you meet are extremely tanky, taking multiple shots to the head, and even if you shoot them in the legs, they will stay and crawl for you when you come back later. Ammo and equipment is also very scarce and not something you can waste, so you have to decide, do you want to avoid a zombie? Do you want to run, or maybe fire one shot to stun them for a second if you're in a tight hole without the ability to circle around them? It's those parts that make Resident Evil 2 Remake really well done for me, combined with the clever use of light sources, sound design which makes the atmosphere eerie, and that constant uneasiness is what makes exploring each section of the RPD a truly amazing experience. The use of background music is minimized, almost non-existent. Instead, you can hear creaks, maybe something in the distance moves or falls, not knowing if that's just something random or maybe there is a zombie here. As I proceeded through RPD, luckily I remembered most of the lock combinations from the first time I played the remake, so I got equipped with a decent chunk of ammo and upgrades relatively fast. Locations in Resident Evil 2 as well as 1 were always made a little bit as a maze, where you can easily get lost if you're playing for the first time, gradually unlocking new areas and passages as you gather more items, either to put a book on a statue so it drops a scepter, or you take out a ruby to put in a box to open that so you can get another item. Also, the RPD building by itself was a sort of a museum, and when you combine all of that style from 90s into a scenario like this, it just adds more character to the game and makes things more scary. They did the same with the mansion, the first one, which I always loved. It also allows for more puzzles, as I said, because the building like this will always have secret passages and hidden rooms that are known only to a few selected individuals. Eventually, Leon also reaches the courtyard in the back, but he is interrupted as a helicopter crashes into a station. Now, in the remake, it's not shown why the heli crashed, but in the original, we see that there was another officer on the roof who was supposed to be rescued. Sadly, as he was overrun by zombies, he started shooting, shot the pilot, and well, there he goes. That's also where Leon sees Claire again, and that's ultimately where her gameplay begins. Yes, she goes through the same locations, but we never get to meet with Leon again until the very end. As we open the secret passage, that's where sadly we have to part ways with Marvin, as he's pretty much at the end of the road, but he doesn't turn until we get back from those hidden locations. It is sad when you have to put him down, although it was still really funny that when you play as Claire and you enter the main lobby, he is very much still a zombie and very much alive. Even though I did down him with Leon, it didn't really matter all that much, but that's where I saw some of those inconsistencies, at least for me personally. Once we get down, that's where we first meet William Birkin, or well, the G-Virus William, whom we have to fight before he falls down in the shaft, Leon probably thinking that's about it. After defeating him, ladders drop down, and I think we can safely assume that it was Ada who brought them down, because in Claire's scenario, Sherry had to be the one to unlock them, so it's not just the game being haha, Pat is unlocked, there is more behind it. Because the moment we arrive in the garage, we get attacked by dogs, my worst enemy in every single Resident Evil game, even worse than lickers. But out of nowhere, unknown to Leon at the time, Ada approaches disguised as an FBI agent, and well, that's the first moment we see them together. I feel like after seeing Leon bring down William, she knew that he was her ticket into the lab, and she would use him to clear a path in a way for her. Ada leaves, as is tradition, and we move into the cells and see a journalist locked inside by Chief of Police Irons, who is a piece of work, I can tell you that, but we will get to him soon. In any case, before Leon was able to properly talk, Mr. X breaks through the wall and well, snaps the dude like it's nothing, so now Leon has to go through the kennels, fight his way through these damn dogs, and then double back once the electricity is on so he can open the cell. Of course, Ada appears again. It seems he was also her informant, or well, useful fool, as we already know that Ada has nothing to do with FBI. Well, at least then we didn't know. After that, we go back to RPD and we put out the fire from the helicopter. That's also the first time, at least in this scenario, that Mr. X appears fully as a Pursue unit, who is a Tyrant, a weapon created by Umbrella to go hunt down the remaining survivors in RPD, as well as to go grab the G-Virus sample. Although in the remake it's not really mentioned he was there for G specifically, but in the original I think yeah, that was the plan. In any case, any survivors had to be eliminated because if word got out that this was Umbrella's doing, they would be cooked. Mr. X himself is a bit different than Nemesis, as his functions are very basic, so hunt, destroy, no specific weapons or tools, just using raw strength. Nemesis is much more deadlier, but we will be, leaving his story for when I cover Resident Evil 3. In any case, besides zombies, you have to run around and kite him because he is relentless. Not much in scenario A, but once you play as Claire, he is pretty much constantly there. You can hear his footsteps getting closer to you whenever you are going through RPD, which is another aspect of the game I really like. Just the anxiety of forgetting about him for a second and then making a turn and all of a sudden music begins as he slams the door in front of you legit made me jump a few times, which is rare for a horror to have that effect on me. Combined with the atmosphere I talked about already, it was something special. Once we are done with that, we go back to the cells to grab the keycard. That's where Leon starts learning more about what is going on with the umbrella because the journalist had a recorder, where he talks to Annette Birkin about the connections of the orphanage we see in Claire's scenario and its connection to the G virus, which I'm sure he heard about from Ada in the first place. I would think that's why this interview was set up, under the guise of talking about the new Umbrella Scholarship program. Of course, I'm sure that he finds himself in that jail cell because of Chief Irons' connection with Umbrella, and those connections run deep. You see, Irons was incredibly corrupt. He was one of the people who was tasked to cover up the incident at the mansion, because that is not something you can pretty much say, ah yeah, there was something which was happening up there in Arklay Mountains, like who cares. We know this because we see emails from William Birkin saying this: we have lost the mansion lab facility due to the renegade operative Albert Wesker. Fortunately, his interference will have no lasting effects upon our continued virus research. He was also told to monitor STAR's operatives like Jill and Chris that we play as in the first game, because at that time they have learned a lot about what was going on, so they couldn't afford to have that information go out into the public. Irons was also fully aware of G and T virus research because William tells him that after the research is complete, he will be appointed to the executive board of Umbrella, ultimately meaning that, well, also Irons will benefit from it. He also received $10,000 for his service. Kinda cheap. In the final email, William tells Irons that Umbrella HQ is sending over spies to get the research on G virus, because William was somewhat, going rogue. He even says, arrest anyone who tries to ask questions, and because Annette was Irons' contact, well, he puts this guy in prison. Also, William doesn't even want Umbrella to have that virus, being that it's his life work. He was also involved in the research of the T virus, or well, another strain, and his strain is the one that infects Raccoon City, or well, accelerates the issues. Going back to Leon, after learning that, he rushes to the parking lot to escape, but Mr. X catches up to him, and after a short encounter, Ada shows up and hits Mr. X with a truck, so now they both have to escape to go into actual Umbrella facility, aka the Nest. We go through Kendo's gun shop. We also find evidence of Jill writing to Kendo that if he wants to stay, he can stay, but if nothing works, he can go and basically find her. Kendo appears and he starts threatening Leon and Ada because his daughter is already infected and he was doing everything to try and save her. Keep a lookout for Kendo because we will talk about him further in Resident Evil 3, he matters there as well. This is just an introduction. After that we jump into the sewers for most grueling experience out there. Look, I like the sewers, but damn, it's annoying to fight and even avoid those sludge things down below. The gator sequence was very cool though. In any case, that's where we meet Annette for the first time. She starts running and Leon, being Leon, takes a bullet for Ada, and that's where the short Ada sequence begins. I do firmly believe that at that moment Ada started really liking Leon, so she patches us up and then uses her hacking tools to go through the vents to catch up to Annette. Of course, Mr. X catches up to us and she ends up in the garbage disposal. The sequence was nice, although that final moment where X is approaching and we have to rush to get through the vents was just basically heart pounding. So Ada passes out due to being wounded, Leon wakes up, and then we continue our push through the sewer to ultimately reach the spark plug chest puzzle. But right before we get the chance, William the G arrives again, so we have to use the big container to take him out. After rescuing Ada, we run towards the cart, which takes us right into Nest to pursue Annette, with Leon still thinking that Ada is FBI and she wants to arrest people, not to steal the G virus itself. As Leon goes into the Nest, we start getting more and more information about what is going on. Keep in mind that Leon doesn't see Sherry there, only at the end with Claire, so our entire goal here is just to get the G virus and basically Annette. Environmental storytelling also tells us a lot on how the nest is constructed, as well as showing what actually happened. You see, before that, Umbrella sent their security services, Alpha Team led by Hank, one of the most beloved side characters in the Resident Evil universe. Once they located William, they were supposed to take him and his research, but William resisted, they downed him and started escaping, but it was too late. As vials were being transported, they drop and we see a rat nibbling on it. So it only took a few short days to infect everything. Ultimately, that was their fault and William's, of course, but you know, mostly William's. Because you see, William couldn't take it that they stole from him. He was a brilliant scientist who was working under Dr. James Marcus, one of the co-founders of Umbrella, and the guy who played a part in making the T-virus itself. Also, funnily enough, both William and Albert Wesker were there together in the Umbrella school, being that Wesker also holds a PhD. He's not just some, guy out there, he's incredibly intelligent, and when you pair him with, stealing the prototype virus and betraying Umbrella, alongside using that virus on himself that gave him superhuman powers, he is someone to behold. So William injects himself with the G virus, goes after the Alpha Team, and Annette couldn't shoot him, but I feel like at that point it would be useless, as G-Virus aggressively transforms the flesh if it's exposed to a lot of damage. That's why he regenerates so fast and we get to actually see him fight on multiple occasions. I believe that was one of the ways how he survived being shot at, multiple times. We also have to pass to the wonderful floral area where experimentation was done on humans and plants, specifically plants, creating these IVs that go into a human, take control, making them truly indestructible, so as you play, there is really no point in wasting too much ammo on them because they do get up after some time, or just use a flamethrower, easier that way. But in order to get level 3 access, we had to make a solution that will spray over the plants, making them lose their strength, and one of the researchers drops that key. We also learned that William was also pretty much betraying Umbrella and that he was talking to the US military because having a BOW or a bioorganic weapon as a leverage is one hell of a thing. It's also when as Leon we get to see Mr. X again. So at that point, again, just run as he was still in pursuit mode, which makes him unkillable. After we get the G-Virus, William is back. And Annette tries to stop him actually, but of course she was unsuccessful and she fools both of us as she drops that, thing down below as we engage in one final fight with him as Leon. To be honest, I can understand Annette's actions here. She does care for her husband, she does love her daughter, but she is also Umbrella coded, meaning that she is not a good person at all, but she does feel the need to stop the G-Virus from ever leaving the lab, which is fine considering that, she saw how dangerous it is, and if William got out of that facility, who knows what else would happen, but the ending fight was really well done. William is strong, but his area of attacks can be avoided, but in any case, once we down him, we get up and that's where Annette tells us the truth about Ada, that she is not some FBI agent but a mercenary who is there for that G sample. Leon of course gets mad, that's where their discussion begins, but you see right there that they grew fond of each other, and he drops his weapon saying that she won't do anything to him, she won't shoot him. Annette catches up and shoots her in the shoulder. G-Virus drops below so no one can get the sample, and Leon does try to protect her. Ultimately she falls down and Leon thinks she is done, but we know what Ada is capable of anyway. After taking the lift down, that's also where we get to talk to Claire again, but the usual self-destruct sequence begins as it happens in Resident Evil games, but right before we get to the train, X appears again. We avoid him narrowly only to have him appear again in his full tyrant form just a few minutes later. He was a tough guy to take down, honestly. The only thing which works against this brute is shooting him directly in the heart. It helps. But even that is not enough, as in the final moment, someone drops us a rocket launcher. We can of course see that it was Ada and she survived, so finally with the rocket we completely evaporate the dude and we catch the train where we meet Claire and Sherry. But here is the catch. Now that's not the end of the story. You see, now we get to play as Claire, but her story is a bit different. With her, we also go through the same locations, of course, some being specifically exclusive for Claire's playthrough, but in any case, we're constantly hunted by Mr. X, and I do love that part where you just hear loud steps coming closer and closer to you, pure horror. Because honestly, for Leon, Mr. X wasn't really that present, but for Claire, he was all the time here when you're going through the RPD. But with Claire, once we go down to the secret escape, we also fight William, but then we meet Sherry for the first time. We get her to trust us and we move into the garage area, and that's where we see Irons fully, as he was taking Sherry to that orphanage to make a deal with her, but the problem is the medallion she has falls down, so Irons has to contact Claire to reach him because that medallion is incredibly important. That's where we also get to play as Sherry as she tries to escape Irons. I won't lie, that part was intense, especially avoiding him around the table because there is nothing else we can do. But guess who also arrives at the orphanage? Our good doctor William G. Birkin, destroying Irons, and then, well, Sherry escapes. So as Claire, we move through the streets of Raccoon City, we arrive at the orphanage, but we find Sherry. And in that moment, Mr. X shows up yet again as we make the run for the elevator. But there is a little difference here. You see, the moment X tries to open the elevator door, he gets absolutely demolished by William, proving again that the Tyrant has nothing to do on the G virus. In any case, we drop down into the sewers again, go through the entire sequence again. But honestly, this time it was a lot easier. I was already avoiding most of the fights, and with Claire you get a nice grenade launcher and machine gun, making clearing out groups of zombies incredibly easy. So even though I was going slowly to catch all of the lore bits, it still took less time than with Leon's scenario, which is sort of to be expected. But Claire's arc revolves around rescuing Sherry from the garbage dump instead of Ada, and Annette is not really hostile towards us, so we actually get to the nest with Sherry to save her because Sherry was already infected by the G virus. But keep in mind that Annette didn't really want Sherry to go into the nest, and the only reason we got there in the first place is because Sherry had that bracelet. You see, that orphanage was the testing ground that Umbrella led to see the effects of viruses on children. That's why I said that both Annette and William were absolutely not good people, so having their fate end up like this was sort of deserved. Of course, once we go to the nest, we're not looking for the G virus vial, we go all the way there to get the antiviral cure because otherwise Sherry would be a goner. Now, as before, we do have a fight with William again, and I don't know if this was adaptive difficulty they use in this game, but damn, the fight against William here took a long time, like much longer than with Leon, especially because I also had a grenade launcher and the rest of the weapons. But in any case, we downed him and we go back to check up on Sherry, and the good thing is she was completely done with the virus. But the problem is, because we took some of from the lab itself, from the level 3 lab, the entire nest is gonna be going into full self-destruct mode. And that's also where Annette succumbs to her wounds because she got slammed into a wall by William a few minutes before that, so she had no chance of survival. And that's where the sad fate of Sherry begins, because on that day she loses both of her parents. In any case, we make our way down to the train, but then of course William comes again. Keep in mind that Mr. X is done, so even though Leon fought him in the end of his scenario, as Claire we don't get to do that, we only get William. Luckily someone left a minigun which allows us to bring him down once again, enter the train and escape. But wait, that's not all, as in the train after we meet Leon like we did in the first scenario, we get one final fight against William in the completely untamed and destroyed version as the G virus completely mutated, because that's how it works. More damage to the tissue, to the flesh, more of that transformation happens. So Claire goes in the back of the train to deal final shots to him. Together with Leon, they remove the cart from the train and William finally falls down into the fire. As well, there is no way he can survive, being that the entire facility was going up in flames. For the end, we get a nice outro sequence with Leon, Claire and Sherry escaping Raccoon City and swearing that they will get to the bottom of what is actually happening. Also insane that this took what, half a day max in game. So lore wise, yeah, these things happen incredibly fast. Resident Evil 2 and 3 is just as I said, 3 days in total. Which makes sense from the narrative standpoint, as that time US government was ready to bomb the city. There was no way of stopping the virus, and even if the virus continued for, let's say, a week, maybe 2 weeks after this, I think it would have infected everyone, so full-on sterilization was pretty much needed, and Umbrella was using that because they hid everything which they've done in Raccoon City in the first place. So in the end, Resident Evil 2, in my opinion, is how you do a proper remake of a cult classic title. They retained a lot of survival elements and gameplay formulas which made the original, obviously replacing fixed camera angles with third person, but the game in general, I mean going from the original, is rich in lore and characters. Alongside beautiful RE engine, we got the whole package of elevating game's atmosphere, playing around with sounds and lights, retaining difficult zombies and showing us the introduction into Leon and Claire that became, staple, fundamental characters for Capcom and the future of the IP, especially Leon. I did play Remake when it released initially, but going through it again slowly and methodically gave me a new appreciation towards it. And its nice bonus modes and stories were included because, well, they shed a different outlook into other people who got stuck in Raccoon City as well, and honestly, playing as Hunk is, well, amazing. That whole arc of the outbreak and ultimately, right before the destruction is probably my favorite era of Resident Evil. Could be nostalgia, but I cannot help it, small city full of zombies is the best. Constant fear and anxiety, watching out for windows, if something is gonna drop in, lickers and other vermin is like no other. And with this, I end my review of Resident Evil 2 Remake. When it was officially announced, back like 7-8 years ago now, I was very skeptical. I thought Capcom wouldn't be able to properly do it, but I was proven wrong. At least with Resident Evil 2. Now what do I think of the sequel? Well, you will find out soon. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing for more. Join our community on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. I will see you soon with another video, but for now, bye bye.